A man walks onto the stage wearing a black turtleneck, jeans, and sneakers. He says a single sentence, one that will echo through history.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. And here it is.
The audience has no idea that in just a few minutes, the world will never be the same. This wasn't just a product launch. It was the moment technology stopped being a tool and became an extension of who we are. Behind that calm voice were decades of setbacks, humiliation, being fired from his own company, years in exile, and a return that would redefine modern business. He wasn't a traditional engineer. He didn't write code. He didn't build the hardware. He built the future through vision. How did he transform a company on the edge of collapse into the defining brand of a generation? And what did it cost him? This is the story of Steve Jobs, the man who taught the world to think different. It's 1972. 17-year-old Steve Jobs is studying at Reed College, a private liberal arts school in Portland, and one of the most expensive colleges in America at the time. During his studies, Steve developed a deep fascination with calligraphy. He later said the course captivated him because it combined historical depth with a level of artistic expression that couldn't be reduced to pure logic. If it hadn't been for calligraphy, Jobs would often say, the Mac would never have had multiple typefaces, proportional spacing, or proper kerning and leading. And since Windows later borrowed heavily from the Mac, personal computers as we know them might never have looked the same. But after just one semester in 1973, he dropped out. He felt there were more important things than following a structured curriculum. Even after officially dropping out, Jobs was allowed to sit in on lectures freely. Back in high school, Jobs had attended electronics classes. Although the program was designed to last 3 years, he stayed for just one. It was there that he met and befriended Steve Wozniak, a technical prodigy and something of a school legend. Woz, as he was known, was 5 years older and already attending university. What brought them together was a shared obsession with computers. At the time, it seemed like nothing more than a friendship between two passionate young men. But in their conversations about circuits and microchips, something far greater was beginning to take shape. The alliance between a dreamer and a genius would become the foundation of a company that would change the world. And it was from this meeting that the story of Apple truly began. After spending a total of a year and a half at Reed College, Jobs returned to his parents' home in California in February 1974 and began looking for work. In his resume, he highlighted his experience with computers and calculators, along with his skills in electronics and digital design. His job search didn't last long. When Jobs saw an opening at Atari, the fast-growing video game company, he walked straight into their lobby and declared that he wouldn't leave until he was hired. The company's founder, Nolan Bushnell, soon became another role model for Jobs. Bushnell possessed extraordinary charisma. He could captivate people, persuade them, embellish facts when necessary, and, if needed, intimidate. Years later, Jobs would master many of those same tactics. Al Alcorn, Atari's chief engineer, immediately recognized potential in the young man. Jobs was hired as a technician at $5 an hour. At Atari, Jobs quickly proved he was more than just a technician. One of his most notable projects was the arcade game Breakout. Nolan Bushnell challenged him to reduce the number of chips inside the machine. The fewer the components, the lower the production cost. Jobs understood how difficult the task was and turned to Steve Wozniak for help. Wozniak managed to design a remarkably compact and efficient circuit, significantly simplifying the system. At Atari, Jobs learned far more than electronics. He learned how to build products under tight deadlines, how to cut costs, and how to make devices simpler and more intuitive. He saw how an idea becomes a machine, and how a machine becomes a business. But this chapter could not last forever. With growing experience, confidence, and a deeper understanding of the market, Jobs began to feel that working for someone else was no longer enough. He wanted to build something of his own, and soon, that drive would lead to the birth of Apple. In 1975, Steve and Woz began attending meetings of a group of computer enthusiasts who called themselves the Homebrew Computer Club. It was a gathering place for like-minded people, geeks and electronics hobbyists who came together to exchange ideas, share discoveries, and push the limits of what personal technology could become. At one of these meetings, Wozniak was inspired to build his own computer. Suddenly, he saw a new possibility. A machine where the keyboard, the monitor, and the computer itself could work together as a unified system. That same evening, Steve Wozniak sketched the first design of what would become the Apple I. When the invention was finally ready, Jobs was stunned. As he pressed the keys, letters instantly appeared on the screen. To him, it felt like magic. He immediately understood that this machine shouldn't remain just a hobbyist project. It had to become a business. And he said, "Even if we fail, at least we'll have our own company. Once in our lives, we'll know what that feels like." Jobs named the new company Apple. The word Apple sounded friendly, simple, almost playful, like a slice of pie. It softened the seriousness of the word computer. At Jobs' request, Ronald Wayne, a draftsman from Atari, designed the company's first logo. It looked more like a detailed illustration than a modern logo. It depicted Sir Isaac Newton sitting beneath a tree, with an apple about to fall on his head. Later, this original design would be dramatically simplified. They presented their invention at the Homebrew Computer Club. The reaction was modest. Most members were curious, but not impressed. However, one person showed real interest. Paul Terrell, the owner of a local computer store. He needed inventory to sell and placed an order for 50 machines. To fulfill that order, they needed to purchase $15,000 worth of parts, money they simply didn't have. The young company faced its first serious challenge. Jobs, however, refused to see it as an obstacle. He persuaded component suppliers to give them the parts on 30-day credit. It was a bold gamble. If they failed to deliver, the company would collapse before it had truly begun. After receiving the parts, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne assembled the machines in the evenings in Jobs' family garage, and within just 10 days, they delivered the entire batch to the store. It was right there, in that garage, that the greatest chapter in the history of Apple truly began. Even so, the Apple I stood out. Unlike many hobbyist kits of the era, it was sold as a fully assembled circuit board. Buyers didn't have to solder the components themselves. However, they still needed to provide their own keyboard, monitor, and power supply. What began as a small batch of 50 boards was no longer just an experiment between friends. It was proof that there was a market, and that they could build for it. In a garage, with borrowed money and raw ambition, they had taken their first true step as entrepreneurs. And this was only the beginning. While the Apple I was slowly selling at Paul Terrell's store, Steve Wozniak was already looking ahead. He understood that the first machine was only a rough draft of something greater. Almost immediately, he began working on a new computer, one that was meant to change everything. That idea would become the Apple II. Wozniak set out to fix the major limitations of the first model. The new machine featured color graphics, not just text on a black screen, but real visual output. It had sound, expanded memory, 8 expansion slots instead of 1, making the system flexible and future-ready. Programs could be stored on a cassette recorder. Most importantly, the computer no longer looked like a board for hobbyists. It was enclosed in an elegant plastic case with a built-in keyboard. This was no longer an experiment, it was a product. But turning an engineering breakthrough into a mass-market success required serious capital. Jobs and Wozniak approached Atari and Hewlett-Packard, and both turned them down. In the mid-1970s, the idea of a personal computer seemed to many executives like a strange toy with no real future. There was no clear market, and therefore, in their eyes, no profit. But Steve Jobs saw further. He wasn't just selling a device, he was selling the future. His conviction attracted entrepreneur Mike Markkula, who invested $90,000 of his own money and helped secure additional funding. At that moment, Apple stopped being a garage startup and began transforming into a real company. In April 1977, the Apple II was unveiled at the first West Coast Computer Fair. For the young company, it was a defining test, and they passed. Apple's booth stood near the entrance, impossible to miss. A large screen displayed vibrant color graphics. It looked like a glimpse of the future. Around that time, a new symbol appeared, the rainbow-striped Bitten Apple logo, designed by Rob Janoff. The logo reflected the product itself, colorful, simple, and approachable. The Apple II became the first computer to move beyond the circle of engineers. You didn't need a soldering iron. You didn't need to be a programmer. It was built for people, for scientists and business owners, doctors and lawyers, students and homemakers. For the first time, technology felt accessible. This was the true turning point. The personal computer stopped being a hobbyist's toy and became a tool, a machine capable of transforming work, education, and everyday life. If the Apple I was the spark, the Apple II was the flame. From that point on, the story no longer moved slowly, it accelerated. Sales surged, momentum grew, and the name Apple began to echo louder and louder. But with success came ambition, and where there is ambition, conflict is never far behind. After the historic visit to Xerox PARC in 1979, Steve Jobs realized that the future of personal computing lay in graphical interfaces, Windows, and the mouse. That insight led to the development of Lisa, Apple's most ambitious step toward building the office computer of the future. Released in 1983, Apple Lisa became one of the first commercially available computers with a full graphical user interface. It was powered by a Motorola 68000 processor, featured 1 megabyte of RAM, an enormous amount at the time, and later models included a 5 megabyte hard drive. Lisa ran an advanced operating system with cooperative multitasking and shipped with the Lisa Office system, a suite that included a word processor, spreadsheet, charting tools, and project management software. This was not a hobbyist machine. It was designed for serious business use. Officially, Lisa was later said to stand for Local Integrated Software Architecture. But the real story was personal. Lisa was the name of Jobs' daughter, Lisa Brennan Jobs. Ironically, at the time, Jobs publicly denied being her father, even though he had named the project after her. Years later, he would openly acknowledge it. Technologically, Lisa was ahead of its time. Commercially, it failed. Priced at $9,995, it was far too expensive for the mass market. Sales were weak, and due to his intense management style, Jobs was removed from the Lisa project. He then shifted his focus to a smaller, more affordable computer, the Macintosh, aiming to create a machine that could reach a much broader audience. Meanwhile, in 1981, IBM entered the market with its first PC. Thanks to its open architecture and strong distribution network, IBM quickly dominated the corporate sector. It became clear that Apple needed stronger executive leadership. In 1983, Jobs recruited John Sculley, then president of PepsiCo, famously asking him, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" Scully became Apple's CEO. Jobs believed Scully's marketing expertise would help the company mature, but he underestimated their differences in vision. On January 22, 1984, Apple aired its legendary 60-second Macintosh commercial, directed by Ridley Scott and inspired by the novel 1984 by George Orwell. The ad portrayed a dystopian future dominated by a Big Brother figure, widely interpreted as IBM, and positioned the Macintosh as the tool of liberation. The commercial became iconic. However, despite the powerful launch, the first Macintosh had significant limitations: limited memory, a closed architecture, and a shortage of software. By the end of 1984, sales began to slow. In early 1985, tensions between Jobs and Scully escalated into a full-scale power struggle. The board ultimately sided with Scully. Jobs attempted to regain control, but failed. In May 1985, he was forced out of the company he had co-founded. Thus ended Jobs' first era at Apple, an era that began with the ambitious Lisa, named after his daughter, and ended with his removal from the company. Ironically, the core ideas pioneered by Lisa, the graphical interface, the mouse, and visual file management, would go on to define the future of personal computing. After Steve Jobs left Apple in 1985, the company quickly began to lose its strategic direction. John Scully took full control, but that same year, Apple reported a loss for the first time in its history and laid off about 1,200 employees. It was a warning sign. Without Jobs, Apple no longer looked like a revolutionary company. The core problem was not a lack of technology, but a lack of clear strategy. While Apple continued to produce a limited line of expensive Macintosh computers, the market was rapidly filling with cheaper, IBM-compatible PC clones. And this is where Microsoft confidently stepped onto the stage. The conflict with Microsoft turned into a strategic disaster for Apple. The first version of Windows closely resembled the Mac's graphical interface, but the legal agreement only covered Windows 1.0. By 1990, with the release of Windows 3.0, Microsoft began aggressively capturing the market. Its operating system could run on virtually any PC, allowing it to scale at a pace Apple's closed ecosystem simply could not match. In 1995, the situation worsened with the launch of Windows 95. Its interface looked increasingly similar to the Macintosh, yet it was installed on millions of affordable computers. Apple was no longer setting the rules, it was defending itself. Inside the company, chaos was growing. The product lineup had ballooned into dozens of confusing performa models with unclear positioning and manufacturing inefficiencies. Between 1995 and 1996, Apple posted multi-million-dollar losses. CEOs came and went: Scully, Spindler, Emilio, but none of them offered a clear path to recovery. By mid-1997, Apple was on the brink of collapse. Falling stock prices, heavy losses, and a complete loss of strategic focus. The board of directors made a move that had seemed unthinkable just a few years earlier. They brought Steve Jobs back. But this was not simply the return of a founder. It marked the beginning of a new era. Ahead were products that would not only save Apple, but redefine entire industries, from personal computers to music, phones, and animation. The world had no idea that one of the most powerful transformations in technology history was about to begin. Steve Jobs' return to Apple became the company's reset point. He didn't just take the chair, he began a cleanup. The first move was killing the failed Newton. Then, at Macworld, Jobs announced a new direction, a drastically reduced product line, a complete board overhaul, and, most unexpectedly, an alliance with Microsoft. Microsoft invested $150 million in Apple. The companies ended their patent war, and Office remained on the Mac. It was humiliating for fans, but absolutely essential for survival. The next step was eliminating the Mac clones. Jobs bought back the licenses, regained control over the system, and closed the profit leak. Apple once again became the sole manufacturer of its computers. Then came a revolution in sales. The Apple Online Store launched, enabling direct sales without middlemen. For the first time in years, the company returned to profitability. But the real turning point came with the release of the iMac. Bright, all-in-one, and without a floppy drive, it became the symbol of the new Apple and the best-selling computer in the United States. Next came the completion of the product matrix: iMac for home users, Power Mac for professionals, iBook for the mass market. The lineup became simple and clear. Then the multimedia era began. In 2001, Apple introduced its first product outside the computer category, the iPod. iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. At first, there was skepticism. Then, it captured 90% of the US digital music player market. In practice, the term MP3 player became synonymous with iPod. 2 years later came the iTunes Store. Legal music purchases for 99 cents. Apple reshaped the entire model of content consumption. In 2005, Apple transitioned to Intel processors. The company abandoned its old architecture and accelerated the Mac. Apple became technologically competitive again. The stock price multiplied. Market capitalization soared. But the biggest move was still ahead. In 2007, Apple dropped the word computer from its name. Now it was simply Apple. And that same day, Jobs delivered the line.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
That's how the iPhone was born. A touchscreen instead of a keyboard. One physical control, full internet access. The smartphone stopped being a button-based device for calls. It became a pocket computer. In 2008, the App Store launched, an application ecosystem. The phone turned into a platform. It was no longer just a device, it was infrastructure. In 2010, the iPad arrived, a new class of device between a smartphone and a laptop. Once again, Apple created a market from scratch. Then came the iPhone 4, glass and steel instead of plastic, a new industrial design with flat edges, a retina display with record-breaking pixel density at the time, so sharp that individual pixels were invisible to the human eye. A front-facing camera and FaceTime made video calls mainstream. The iPhone 4 wasn't just an update. It cemented Apple's dominance in the smartphone market and transformed the iPhone into a global technological standard. In 2003, Steve Jobs was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, a neuroendocrine tumor of the pancreas. Unlike the more common and aggressive pancreatic cancer, this type develops more slowly, giving him a real chance to fight the disease. However, Jobs initially delayed surgery. For about 9 months, he tried alternative treatments, including special diets, herbal remedies, and spiritual practices. Only later did he agree to undergo the necessary operation. Despite his illness, he continued leading Apple and personally presenting revolutionary products that reshaped the technology industry, from the iPhone to the iPad. Even as his health declined, Jobs remained the face of the company and a symbol of innovation. By 2011, his condition had become critical. In August, he officially stepped down as CEO of Apple, passing leadership to his successor, Tim Cook. On October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs died at the age of 56. But his legacy proved stronger than life itself. He didn't just create devices, he changed the way people communicate, listen to music, work, and interact with technology.